I met up with Dr. Judith Reisman, a world historian in the destruction of human sexuality. Dr. Reisman is recognized as an expert witness exposing the sex industry's hidden agenda.
Playboy sued you, or you sued Playboy?
No, Playboy sued me for libel and slander.
And what happened?
I won.
She's fought the pornography industry for decades and even won a lawsuit against Playboy.
So how did we get here to where we're at today? Because I don't think pornography has always been such an epidemic cancer within our society like it is today.
No, not at all. We were, up to the end of the Second World War, a conservative Judeo-Christian nation. The turning point for all that was Dr. Alfred Kensey, his book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, 1948. He was the father of the sexual revolution, and therefore the father of everything that has come from that. And certainly one of the key things was pornography.
Dr. Alfred Kensey ushered the destruction of our nation's moral code with his books, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male and Sexual Behavior in the Human Female, known as the Kensey Reports. The world recognized him as the leading scientific expert on human sexuality. The reports claimed that humans were sexual from birth, and that what we deemed as immoral sexual behavior was actually normal, thus making it moral. Once a biologist who studied gall wasp, Kensey's obsession with sexuality led him to found the Kensey Institute for Sex Research at Indiana State University. What people to this day are not aware of were the methods he used to collect his data.
And I looked at the graphs that he provided, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 tables. And I said, wait a minute, that's a 2-month-old baby. How does he know a 2-month-old baby did or did not have an orgasm? And then table 34, a 4-year-old child, 26 orgasms in 24 hours. That's an around-the-clock experiment.
Wow, that's torture.
That's torture, you bet. He also actually employed bona fide pedophiles to do what they did to children for his so-called data.
Kensey wanted to prove that we are sexual from birth, so it wasn't surprising that he drew his data from pedophiles, rapists, and murderers. They were the perfect sample because obviously a rapist pedophile will have a skewed perspective on sexuality, convincing himself that his victim finds pleasure in the act of being raped. Using a stopwatch and a ledger, they recorded their sexual experiments, systematically molesting thousands of young children under the guise of science. This research was compiled in his books, Sexual Behavior of the Human Male and Sexual Behavior in the Human Female.
He said I had 196 pre-adolescents under 12, and he broke them up into 6 categories. And fainting, convulsions, screaming, writhing, striking what he called their partner, that's somebody who's raping them, okay? And they were trying to get away, but he said they enjoyed it. They definitely enjoyed it.
The research in Kensey's books were partly based on the collection of data and confessions of a Nazi pedophile during World War II, Dr. Fritz von Balusek, who raped hundreds of children. After the war, the Nazi officer was charged and put on trial for the murder of a 10-year-old girl. They found detailed records of von Balusek's heinous sexual acts with children, revealing his correspondence with Kensey. Dr. Kensey, who was fully aware of the Nazi officer's atrocities, warned him in his letters to be careful and encouraged him to continue his research. During the trial, the judge said, "I got the impression that you got to the children in order to impress Kensey and to deliver him material." To his surprise, Balusek replied, "Kensey himself asked me for that."
Now that became the foundation for the sex educational structure that fed itself into what we are teaching our children right now as we sit here and speak.
I venture to suggest that what we are putting into our books on sex education today is based almost fully upon philosophic guess.
And of course it was the foundation of all the changes in our laws, the sodomy laws, the abortion laws, everything else. I mean, he's there. His handprints are on everything that deals with sexuality. from all these people, he was able to tell us, quote, the truth about ourselves, the truth about what we were really doing behind closed doors. And he lied about our fathers, my father's generation and grandfathers. He lied about them because he projected onto them what he himself was doing.
What he was struggling with.
Yes.
It didn't take long for Kensey to deceive the world with his fraudulent data, convincing us that we were sexually repressed and ignorant to the truth.
First, the media drank the Kool-Aid. They were carefully taken care of by the Kensey Institute to drink the Kool-Aid, okay. And then once they drank the Kool-Aid, the scientists, quote unquote, drank the Kool-Aid, and then the legislators drank the Kool-Aid, and then the lawmakers drank the Kool-Aid, and here we are.
Essentially, what Kensey did was he changed our belief about ourselves. This change of belief naturally changed our behavior. Soon, Kensey's ideas permeated everything in our society, from our legal system reducing the penalty for sexual crimes and legalizing abortion, the media promoting his philosophy to the educational system, teaching children his views on sexuality. What's more, the pharmaceutical industry capitalized from the sexual revolution. We saw the emergence of STDs, sexual enhancers, and the morning after pill. The divorce rate soared along with sexual crime. As a people, we would never be the same again. Our innocence was lost forever. Ultimately, Kensey's fraudulent data led to the legalization of pornography.
One of the virgins in college that read Kensey and believed him was a guy named Hugh Heffner. Okay, so he's in college.
So Heffner was an advocate for Kensey's.
He reads Kensey and he says, hey, everybody's been lying to me. They've all been diddling around doing all this stuff, and I have been standing here being a nice guy. Forget it. He says, I will be, and I'm quoting him, Kensey's pamphleteer. I will be Kensey's pamphleteer.
Really?
So from there, he began to advocate for changes in the law, and he created a magazine called Playboy, which then he said would reflect what Kensey had found about human sexuality.
In his fraudulent
data. America was educated by a pedophile whose work was labeled as science. Just as Darwin was the father of legitimizing evolution, Kensey was the father of legitimizing the sexual revolution and all that's based upon that today.
Sure enough, Heffner was true to his word. Not only did he popularize pornography on a global scale, he also helped to legalize it.
I want a congressional investigation of Kensey. At some point, we may, in fact, be able to get a public to be aware that they've been raped. The whole nation has been raped. That is what's happened to us. We have been raped, and you cannot expect to survive a rape without a great deal of illness, pain, and trauma. And we've gone through it. Now we've got to find a way to get out of it.
So whatever happened to Kensey? Well, this glorified psychopath eventually died of a slow and painful disease called orchitis, a lethal infection of the testicles due to years of brutal masochistic masturbation and other vile sexual acts. How ironic. The preacher of sexual liberation died from following his own message. Sadly, his destructive work continues to live on with his lies, and to this day, we continue to fund the Kensey Institute with our tax dollars. Now, for any man who's trapped in pornography, he must first realize that the root of the problem is based on a lie by Kensey and a lie from the enemy of his soul. You need to realize you've been duped. You've been suckered, because ultimately, Kensey's purpose was to remake man into his image, which really wasn't a pretty one.
The pro-life movement is a war on women by the patriarchy, or so we are told.
Oh, I think the war on women is real.
The war on women has exploded.
It's an ugly new battlefield in the war on women.
The war on women.
This war on women.
The fight to protect women's right to choose is the most fundamental and patriotic fight that we have right now.
Are we ready to fight against male supremacy in all its forms?
The abortion lobby tries incessantly to claim the mantle of women's rights, empowerment, and equality by portraying childbearing as an obstacle to empowerment. Recently, we've seen abortion advocates latch on to imagery from The Handmaid's Tale, a story that frames our ability to bear children as a means of enslavement by patriarchal forces. But if we look at the actual history instead of fantasy, we see that pro-life, pro-family feminism has been carrying the torch for women's empowerment all along. It is the sexual revolution and the abortion movements, both largely driven by men, that have waged the real war on women. Let's begin our story with the 1950s and early 60s, that period of time which is often criticized as the epitome of women's oppression under a patriarchal system.
I'm not going to let a woman talk to me like this. This meeting is over. Good luck, Miss Megan.
In the 50s and 60s, women did face genuine problems of inequality and oppression, lacking the opportunities that men had to excel educationally and vocationally. In the workplace, it was common to hear of women that were fired simply for being pregnant. In her landmark book called The Feminine Mystique, a feminist named Betty Friedan, who herself had been fired for being pregnant, issued a war cry for equal opportunity for women in every sphere of life. The Feminine Mystique has some serious problems, but here's what I want to point out. Betty Friedan claimed that the reductionist view of women as just housewives was a bad idea, but not a bad idea of traditionalism or Judeo-Christianity, but of atheist Sigmund Freud. Furthermore, Betty never mentioned abortion or contraception as a means to liberate women. She said that creative work would set women free, and that this was always inclusive towards marriage and motherhood, though Betty herself would later admit she did not emphasize the importance of marriage and motherhood as much as she should have. Betty became leader of the National Organization for Women, and her initial stance for women's equality, which excluded abortion, was consistent with the early feminists who came before her. Alice Paul, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and other suffragettes, those heroes of feminism, agreed that abortion was wrong, but they also saw it as a sign of female oppression, often used by men to control and abuse women. Standing against Betty Friedan's women's movement was the sexual revolution, epitomized by Hugh Heffner and his Playboy magazine. Heffner's vision for sexuality was popularized among women by Helen Gurley Brown, who had wanted to work for Heffner until she got the opportunity to transform the homemaker magazine Cosmopolitan into a sex magazine, a Playboy for women. She featured nude centerfolds just like Playboy and an icon of a pussycat after the articles, just like the Playboy bunny icon. Helen wrote the book, which became the basis for the modern hit TV show and films Sex and the City. Helen's solution for women was that hard work and lots of unmarried sex without getting pregnant would set them free. This philosophy came to life in the Cosmo Girl, this ideal woman portrayed in Helen's magazine. Only the Cosmo Girls were often complete fabrications. The writers were given a set of rules or guidelines on how to invent their stories and how to make up experts to quote. Then they told these lies to unsuspecting women as if they were gospel. The Cosmo Girl was little more than a money-making scheme, a marketer's and CEO's dream come true. She worked hard, she bought lavishly from pharmaceutical, medical, beauty, fashion, and travel industries, and to top it all off, she did not push for those pricey, bothersome extras like family tax breaks, paternity leave, shorter work weeks, and more flexible work arrangements.
I'm talking about a woman's right to choose.
Through her magazine, month after month, in many subtle ways, Helen sent the message to America's women that motherhood and children were an insurmountable obstacle to their freedom. Betty Friedan called Cosmopolitan quite obscene and quite horrible. Betty opposed treating women merely as sex objects, and she defended motherhood and the family. Betty said, "You want a feminism that includes women who have children and want children, because that's the majority of women." So how did the sexual revolution of Hugh Heffner and Helen Gurley Brown take over the women's movement of Betty Friedan? Answer: 2 more men, white and upper middle class, whose goal was to legalize and mass market abortion all across America. Larry Lader and Bernard Nathanson were abortion advocates who would go on to found the abortion advocacy group NARAL, which still exists today. Lader's goal was the complete repeal of abortion laws as a means to controlling population growth and upsetting sexual morality. He was the biographer and good friend of Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood. But Lader's ideas on abortion were so radical, even for Sanger, that it fractured their relationship. It wasn't until another man, Alan Guttmacher, took over Planned Parenthood that the organization began publicly advocating the mass legalization of abortion. Abortion was mainly an upper middle class white man's practice, and Lader worked hard to push it on the feminists, knowing they could promote it even better than he could, if only they'd buy in. In Aborting America, Bernard Nathanson records what Lader said to him at their NARAL meetings. If we're going to move abortion out of the books and into the streets, we're going to have to recruit the feminists. Friedan has got to put her troops into this thing, while she still has control of them. We've got to keep the women out front, and some black women especially. Why are they so damn slow to see the importance of this whole movement to themselves? Just as Helen told lies to sell the Cosmo Girl, Lader and Nathanson told lies to sell abortion. As Nathanson would later confess, we sensationalized the effects of illegal abortions and fabricated polls which indicated that 85% of the public favored unrestricted abortion when we knew it was only 5%. When we spoke of deaths due to illegal abortion, it was always 5,000 to 10,000 a year. I confess that I knew the figures were totally false. But these lies were so effective that Lader was able to win over many people, including Betty Friedan. On November 18, 1967, in the Chinese room of the Mayflower Hotel in D.C., Betty insisted that abortion be inserted into the National Organization for Women's platform. Abortion was adopted by the votes of 57 people, after which a third of the women at the conference resigned from the National Organization for Women. Larry's lies and propaganda even made their way into the infamous Roe v. Wade decision, with his book Abortion being cited no less than 7 times in the court's opinion. After abortion on demand was legalized, the rates of abortion and divorce skyrocketed, while birth rates dropped and marriage rates plummeted. Today, Americans commit about 1 million abortions per year. That's 2,700 preborn children killed every day, and more than a third of abortions are committed by Planned Parenthood. Seeing trends like these even back in 1981, Betty Friedan wrote a follow-up book called The Second Stage, expressing her regrets that the feminist movement had demonized the family. Bernard Nathanson left his position at NARAL, converted to Catholicism, and became a pro-life activist, producing one of the most important anti-abortion films of all time, The Silent Scream.
There is no question this child senses the most mortal danger imaginable.
But let's think back to the beginning of our story, to one of the moments that first stirred the fire in the soul of Betty Friedan when she was fired for being pregnant. To say that abortion was a solution to her pregnancy is, in essence, to agree with her boss. It is to say that her pregnant self is the problem, that her natural ability as a woman is the problem, and that her child is the problem. Abortion has done nothing to correct the oppression and inequality that women in these situations face. It perpetuates it. Abortion is an excuse for men, businesses, and communities to neglect, exploit, and discriminate against women. Rather than support the mother and her child, they forcibly divide the two, pressuring the mother to have her child killed. Abortion is the ultimate manifestation of the oppression of women, and women and children cannot be liberated in society until abortion is unthinkable. Telling women they must have the ability to take the lives of their children in order to achieve fulfillment is not empowering. True feminism seeks to promote all aspects of who a woman is, in her education, in her vocation, in her marriage, and in her motherhood. For it is that commitment to a holistic view of women and children in all of their personhood that will truly set us free. For more on the story of how the sexual revolution hijacked the women's movement, see the book Subverted by Sue Ellen Browder.